Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video I've got my day 1 Crucible Discoveries for you guys, and of course we're going to be discussing everything as much as we can in detail. Apologies for any mistakes, of course it is day 1, this is just what I've got so far, and we'll see more about the mechanic as we continue to discover things. Alright, so let's get into it. First and foremost, how do you use Crucible? Well, okay, in your maps, you're going to get a Crucible node here, and essentially what it's going to allow you to do is come up to it, and you're going to see an option screen like this, and it's going to have an option for you to cook your main end weapon, your offhand weapon, and the leftmost item in your inventory, which is going to be, you know, whatever it's going to be, a shield, a weapon, and any sort of thing like that, but it must be identified. All right, so you can basically carry a weapon that you can cook in your main head, offhand, or more importantly, in your inventory. So this is going to be the one you're going to be using most of the time. You're going to be picking up items off the floor and having them on your leftmost side of your inventory, identifying them and then cooking them every map. We'll talk about what I've been doing here in a second. Okay, so next on to the elephant in the room. This mechanic is ridiculously hard. Even if you are doing level appropriate content, it is absurdly hard. It's ridiculous how difficult it actually seems to be. And you know, if you fully charge up, you know, a Crucible Forge in your map, which actually feels like it's balanced around you doing so, which we'll get to in a second here, it is ridiculously brutal. Like, we're talking about the mobs being, you know, like essence like times 9. You know, that's how hard they are. They're far harder than a map boss. You know, it's crazy. Which, you know, does feel a little bit weird. You know, everyone's been feeling this, I think. And it does kind of like force you into a scenario in which you have to nerf the rewards that are coming from your Crucible to kind of like even get a chance to use it. You know, we'll get into whether or not it's worth it to use it in a second here. But that is definitely a pretty challenging portion here. All right. So next up to the actual using it. So obviously you're going to go ahead and, you know, pick one here. We'll use this, you know, level appropriate item here. And then basically all you have to do is hold down the node here, and you're just going to charge it up, you know, waiting. And you're going to wait until all the way until it hits the node here. And then as soon as you get the node highlighted, you're going to stop, and then you're going to go crazy on the monsters here. Now this is a, I think, T10 map, and I am, you know, 90, and I got pretty reasonable gear. And you know, I'm not even one-shotting all this stuff either. Now in endgame, it's probably going to become a lot easier. You know, I imagine it's just the league side of things. But you know, they are pretty highly tuned though, so you know, be wary in T16 maps, and we'll see why you want to do T16 maps and higher in a second here. But you know, be wary, very wary in the red maps. It's going to be pretty damn brutal, just like Essence is, just like Harvest is early on in a league starter. Okay, so then after you've cooked it, you're going to reveal the Crucible tree. You know, you've got it there, you've got any item off the floor, and you see the Crucible tree. Okay, what do we got here? Well, we've got a 5 deep claw here, and we've got some, you know, pretty cool stuff here. Reduce attack speed, double damage, and also stuff like that. Now, it's important to note that these modifiers here, this 0.8% crit chance, that is a base modifier, it seems. Even though it doesn't show up on the weapon necessarily, it does seem to be a base modifier. I believe that the cold damage has probably been added on here. I think it has. Yeah, you can see that it has been added on here. So essentially what that means is that if you did get a reduced attack speed modifier on this Crucible tree, it would reduce the base attack speed of the weapon, which is far more impactful than just reducing your global attack speed. Similarly, if you got base critical strike chance, which is insane, it would modify the base critical strike chance, which would then be multiplied by the base critical strike local modifier, you know, which would multiply that, and then you could multiply all of that by your entire global critical strike chance multiplier, and then you know, it's very powerful. It's insane. But you got to be taking the pros and the cons. Like, be very careful because like on a weapon like mine, my Crucible tree here, I actually have a one which is a minus 3% crit chance, which is really bad because, you know, that would take my bow from 7.86 like way down to like, you know, like 3 or something like that percent, and it would be terrible. It would be an absolute disaster here, and you know, that would be not good. All right, so you're gonna be very careful with that. Definitely pick and choose based on your knowledge with this now, and that is gonna be really important. Okay, so next up there is seemingly, you know, like there's groups of modifiers for the different weapons. So shields will have a different set of modifiers, claws will have a different set of modifiers, bows, everyone has a different set of modifiers, and each of those modifiers have different weights, as well as different level ranges in which they can roll. Now, level ranges, what does that mean? Well, depending on the item level of your weapon, it can roll different modifiers, unless you have a 84 seems to be the highest plus item. It cannot roll everything. So this is pretty interesting in the fact that you, first of all, need a high item level base, which will obviously make getting the best tree kind of a little bit harder. But also, you now have the opportunity to do what could be called crucible blocking. Now, what does this mean? Well, it means that if you find a specific cutoff point at any point where there is like nodes that you don't want and nodes that you do, and you get exactly that item level, then you can kind of create a scenario in which you can engineer a higher chance to get exactly the modifiers you want, which can obviously be pretty impactful. That could be pretty good, and you could be making a lot of money as a result of that. Now, why is this particularly powerful? Well, there are currency-related modifiers on crucibles, which you can get by cooking them up. We'll get to the min-maxing of the actual method of cooking these in a second here, but you can get specific currency modifiers. Now, each currency mod can only spawn on the 3rd and 4th row here. Now, a tree has a total of 5 rows that it can spawn. It may or may not spawn all of them. Generally, all of the items in maps I've seen do spawn 4 rows at least. So you got the first row here, this is tier 1, second row, this is tier 2, third row, fourth row, this is tier 3 and 4, and fifth row is tier 5. So 3 and 4 generally share a lot of modifiers, all of them together, so these are kind of interchangeable here. But the currency modifiers spawn exclusively on tier 3 and 4, with I think 1 or 2 of them spawning on 5. And a lot of the currency modifiers are actually item level restricted, so you won't be seeing them if you go ahead and do low item level items. So that's pretty important information there. Okay, so the question would be, okay, how rare are they? And is there any sort of way to manipulate that? Well, we'll get into that in a second here, but I do want to quickly talk a little bit more about the actual overall mechanic before we get into a spreadsheet. Okay, so in terms of how this is actually going to play out, it probably will play out in one of 2 ways. So first and foremost, the trees are overwhelmingly powerful. As we've talked about, they're incredibly strong. You're going to want crucible trees on every single weapon that you've got, but you get one randomly. You do not get to pick your crucible tree. It's pretty much random, and we haven't seen a whole lot of action in terms of any of the forge maps yet. At least I haven't seen any. So I would have to say they're probably going to be pretty expensive, unless that there is some way to specifically target farm them. Maybe we can look them up here. What are they called? I think that they're called igneous geodes or something like that. Let me see if I can track them down here. Just day one things here. So it is called a igneous geode. Let's see here if I can see if there's any for trade here. Igneous geode. So are there any? There is 72 currently. Wow, they are underpriced. Okay. Well, igneous geodes, I have not been able to drop a single one from the crucible monsters in the mechanic. And I would have to hazard a guess that they can only come from the selling of crucible weapons with the specific node associated with igneous geodes, which we'll talk about in a second here. And those igneous geodes and later on the crystalline geodes are pretty much the only way to manipulate your crucible tree. Without those geodes and the map that results from them, you cannot manipulate the trees, you cannot change the trees, they are just what you get. So you could have the most insane mirror tier weapon here, and if you didn't have any igneous geodes, well, you could not change the tree, and if it had garbage tree, like my weapon here has a garbage tree, too bad luck. You're not going to be able to do anything about it. And obviously we know how unfortunately that would be. Okay, so we're going to create a scenario in which you're probably going to be cooking up a bunch of the weapon which you do want to use, and then once you get a really insane tree, which is like most of the way there, you're probably going to want to go ahead and craft that, whether it's including fracturing to like be able to get it there, or just crafting with a ton of essences or anything like that. That's probably going to be the route you go down. And then if it is insane and it's got a good stats and it's good crucible tree, then you would probably go and invest in the map which comes from the igneous geodes, and then you would try and smash a couple in together and see what the result would be. But I imagine that's probably going to be a pretty expensive option when we get to the actual how rare of these igneous geodes is going to be. Because From what it seems, it's probably going to be about as rare or rarer than a Recombinator was in the Sentinel League, and it's far more restrictive in order to get these. So we'll get into that right now. Okay, so we've talked about the power, we've talked about the cooking. We're going to be talking about quickly about how you're going to be able to play this out. So in maps, the only way which I've found to be able to successfully and consistently reveal trees in search of currency nodes and stuff like that is essentially to have a loot filter with the base that you're going to want to be cooking every map on it. Now with the bases, you're going to either want the weapon that you want to use. So in my case, it would be a spine bow. And in your case, it might be like something like an Imperial Claw, or you're going to want an item which you want to cook for profit. Now, the only thing which dictates what item you would want to cook for profit is the weapon and or the item base. There is a node on the trees which allows you to sell an item for a unique version of it. Now, the weighting on this is pretty low. We'll get to that in a second. But overall, you can sell these items for a guaranteed unique, and that is why I was cooking champion kite shields, and I have champion kite shields on my filter. Now, when you actually put these in the oven, essentially the way it's going to go is that if it is an item level appropriate item for the map that you are running, you put it in the oven, boom. It's always going to give you the first tree node as long as you cook it as long enough. You can always access the tree every single map. So you're going to be able to scout, if you do 20 maps, you can scout 20 Crucible trees if you have 20 champion kite shields, for example. And that would give you X% chance at finding a Aegis Aurora, which would be pretty damn cool. And whether or not that equation works out to be worth it is another story. We're going to have to do some maths on that. But it most likely will. Now, whether it works out to be that you want to do a champion kite shield specifically, or a base which you can turn into a unique specifically, is another story. But you are definitely going to want to be cooking items every map for profit, assuming you can actually do the mechanic, even though it is really hard. First and foremost, for your own power of your character, you want to get a good Crucible tree, and you want donor Crucible trees to later on, when the Geodes become more accessible, smash into your main weapon. But then, of course, you can still roll the currency ones even on these original bases that you are using. So yeah, basically have the bases that you want to cook on your item filter every map. Pick them up. Make sure you always have one on the leftmost part of your inventory. Cook it. If it's trash, vendor it. Next item in, and that's the cycle. It's going to be kind of like that. You're constantly cooking something, constantly, getting some juice from it. And that seems to be the way to go. All right, let's talk a little bit about the rates here, because this is where a lot of the actual kind of discussion starts to be unveiled. Okay, so all of these mods here, these ones up here, are all the 3rd and 4th tier here. And I've basically grabbed them all off the data mine, and I have added all of their values together. And it adds up to a sum weight of 85,200 for T3 and T4. Now, all these mods can roll on either T3 or T4. So it's 85,200 for both respectively. All right, and that's both columns. So we talked about that in game here. That's this column and this column. So all of those modifiers can roll on this column or this column, and they all have their own chance. Now, in terms of looking for the currency ones, you can see the weights here of the currency ones. So the one that I had there, 10 Regal Orbs, that is on the T3 slot. I had a 75 in 85,275, or probably a little bit higher than that because of the other ones here, chance to roll that. Now, I'm not sure what that is, but that is a very, very, very low chance to roll. Okay, but wait, it does get a little bit better. You can roll multiple columns here. So you can see here that I've got, 2 T3s and 2 T4s on this weapon. Similarly, I have 2 T3s, 2 T4s. So you do get 2 shots at it most of the time, which is going to be in your favor. Now, someone can do the math on that. I'm not sure what that's going to be at this stage. But overall, you do also have a few different hits that you can get here. I do imagine it's probably going to be somewhere like 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 cooks. You do get a hit, which you can sell for some currency. And then the real big hits, which I imagine everyone's going to want, are these ones down here, Igneous Geode and Crystalline Geode. As we talked about earlier, these are the things which give you the chance to get the maps, which will then allow you to combine the trees, which, as I mentioned, is going to be incredibly in demand and incredibly powerful. And I imagine what it's going to be is that all of these are a consolation prize. This one is specifically insane. You can see it has 100 weight though, but you do get to roll out potentially 4 times. But it is quite rare, but if you do hit it, it's going to be insane. And then the Igneous Geode, which is quite common, is going to be the real moneymaker, just like Recombinators with a real moneymaker for the Sentinel League. So you're gonna be cooking up items, and you're gonna be making a ton, I would say, off these Igneous Geodes. And then rarely, if you're doing a specific base, you're gonna be getting a pretty big payout sometimes on that 100 roll there. And then everything else here will kind of add together to give you a little bit of juice every now and then when you do discover it. So that's kind of how it's going to be playing out, guys. And I'm going to tell you guys now what I'm going to be doing. So first and foremost, I am going to be, going to be cooking up spine bows, because spine bows is my bow of choice. And what I'm looking for here, when I'm cooking up the spine bows, is a reasonable base, which I could use for either an elemental or physical bow. And then once I find like 4 reasonable ones, I'm gonna roll them all for the modifier which I need, and then fracture it. It's gonna be +2 arrows in my case, but I'm gonna need a specific item level bow for that, so you can kind of see that it's already getting pretty challenging, you know, to get the tree that you want on the exact things. So it's gonna be it's hurting my brain even thinking about it. Like, I already just disproved my strategy which I had, so you know, you gotta see here I'm still thinking about it, but it's kind of like the chicken before the egg. Are you gonna start with a crucible tree, or are you gonna start with the item? Well, it really does depend on how rare the igneous geodes are gonna be and how expensive they're gonna be. But already from that statement, let's say that you wanted a fractured bow at 86 item level 86 fractured +2 arrow bow, you know, those are very, very rare, and you're gonna need at least 4 of those +2 arrow bows to even get started, because it's 1 in 4 on average. So you're probably gonna actually not care about the crucible tree and just smash things into it until it's valuable. So, man, I would say that the igneous geodes are gonna be ridiculously expensive. That's the only thing I can think of. I think that they're gonna be insanely expensive. That has to be how it's gonna be. So for your average player not going for an insane weapon, you're probably going to want to be picking up the bases and identifying them and trying to craft a decent weapon for yourself. And then for the hyper expensive players, you're going to be buying those geodes and probably using that to smash into a weapon and try and make it good. And then there's obviously the players who could be gambling and going for those unique outcomes on stuff like champion kite shields, which is, you know, pretty interesting there. And you could be getting something pretty good. All right, final thing here. You know, this has been a bit of a rambly video, but it really is a pretty interesting mechanic in terms of how to min to max, actually, now that I get to it. When you actually go all the way down to the bottom here, I will show you guys, can take a look for yourself, that these do have an item level requirement. So this first one here, the T3 one, item level 68 requirement. And this one here has a required level of 78. Now, I'm not sure what this effective means, but you know, overall, that's what it seems to be. There will be item level requirements based on these things here. And it gets pretty interesting when you get to the igneous geodes here, which does say require 75. And then more interesting when it gets to the crystalline geode, which is the one which allows you to smash uniques together, from what I understand. And it says 84, which I'm not sure what the effective means again, but it is something. Something's going on there. I don't know what it is, but something. So overall, this is pretty crazy. This is pretty interesting. I'm pretty excited to see how this plays out. I think it's going to be pretty cool. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this rambly, but, you know, incohesive, but, you know, hopefully information dense video on day one. It's definitely got a lot more to it than meets the eye, and getting the perfect weapon, understanding the best way to run it on a map-to-map basis is going to be a pretty interesting thing to figure out. Do you go with your weapon? Do you go with a weapon that you could sell, or do you go with a weapon that you could chance and sell off to other people? And also, is there a statistically correct base type to go with in terms of maximizing igneous geodes and ores and all sorts of stuff like that? You know, like, I don't know, because all of the different bow bases and shield bases and stuff like that, they all have different weights, so you can kind of see that there is a lot to consider there. All right, anyway, until next time, hope you guys have enjoyed. Cheers.